Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 348 of Humanity Rising on this 27th day of October. As we've been noting over the last several weeks and actually months, we're approaching the Conference of Parties beginning next Monday in Glasgow. World leaders are beginning to prepare to travel there as we, as a world community, are going to focus for 12 days on global warming, the accelerating impact of ecological turbulence due to climate change, and what we as a progressive community, as governments, as corporations, as people of goodwill from around the world can do in this critical hour when we are discovering that we are in code red, and that we are now in the climate tipping point, which means essentially that what we could have avoided up to now is now inevitable. And that is rising, increasingly lethal ecological turbulence, in the face of which our governments are less and less capable of ensuring any kind of stability. So that's our world as we convene Humanity Rising today, 18 months after we began in the depths of the pandemic. And we want to turn our attention today to something that can contribute deeply, mightily, to the kind of coherence that we need to maintain as we experience increasing turbulence in our world all around us. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, the world at almost every level is increasingly chaotic and unstable. So one of the meta themes for Humanity Rising over these months has been to explore what can bring about healing, what can deepen our understanding, and what can bring us into a sustained coherence such that no matter what is happening on the outside in the external world, we can maintain an equilibrium out of which comes compassion, not only for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Sound is one of the most effective tools for everything that we want to do with ourselves, from health and well-being to healing, even communication with the larger conscious ecosystem in which we find ourselves. Today, we're very privileged to have Dr. Jeffrey Thompson, who's a specialist for over 40 years now in what he's come to call neuroacoustics, which is essentially the scientific understanding and instrumentality of sound to catalyze an inner equilibrium in our bodies that can produce healing and well-being. Dr. Thompson has worked with just about everybody from Deepak Chopra and Barbara Marx Hubbard and Hay House to Fortune 500 companies, to NASA, to scientific organizations and bodies around the world, and to ordinary people on how we can use the therapeutic capacity of sound. And as you know, from previous sessions and even some presentations that I've given, one of the most universal, ancient understandings about our cosmos and how it came to be and how it maintains the intricacy that sustains life is through arithmetic geometric forms that are associated with sound. So in exploring the phenomenon of sound, we go not only to the heart of ourselves, we go to the heart of creation itself. And that unifying rubric that helps sustain the entire cosmos as an integrated whole. We're going to forego our normal heart coherence meditation today to begin our program because Jeff Thompson will be providing a presentation. And then at the end, we're going to do heart coherence meditation in a way that he will guide us, which I'm sure will take us far deeper than anything that I could provide in the present moment. So thank you for joining us, everyone. We are very pleased now to invite Jeff Thompson to Humanity Rising. So Jeff, I turn the program over to you. You take it for as long as you would like to make your presentation, and then I'll circle back for dialogue with the people in the chat box. But over to you, and welcome. Somehow we're not hearing you.
We're missing your audio, Jeff.
Sorry, I had not turned my audio back on.
There you go. There you go.
So it's my pleasure and honor to be here with you. I really love what you're up to. I've been hoping to connect with a group of like-minded people like this, and I agree. The world is in a strange place right now. But you know, the more that we look out on the latest discoveries in quantum physics, I have all these news feeds I watch all the time. You know, quantum physics and holistic health and neurology and things like that. It's astounding what's going on. The depths of the things that are being discovered in quantum physics. Every single one of them now is aligning closer and closer and closer to what we see talked about in 3,700-year-old texts from India, the Vedas and the Sutras of Patanjali, and the oldest texts on the planet, the I Ching from China, 5,000 years old. All talk about similar things where, I remember in high school physics class, the whole thing about the electromagnetic spectrum, that everything is made from photons and the electromagnetic effect, and my body is made of cells, and the cells are made of compounds, and the compounds are made of atoms, and the atoms are arranged on the periodic table, which, by the way, are arranged in a harmonic series. The atom by atom by atom that marches across the periodic table are constructed based on the same laws we see in music theory. Harmonies and chords. The white and the black keys on that grand piano behind me are just frequencies that are mathematically related to each other, that when you play different frequencies together in a chord, they happen to fit nicely geometrically together. Frequencies that don't align properly bump into each other and create turbulence and discordant frequencies. But the atoms are made of smaller parts. We build these big atom smashers to smash them apart to see what they're made of. It's like a monkey hitting a pocket watch with a sledgehammer to see what it's made of. But we break those, protons, electrons, and neutrons open, and what's inside is smaller little particles, quarks and charms, and we break those apart. Hadrons and leptons, we break those apart. There's Z bosons, and at some point, at the lowest, deepest level, there's nothing inside. You break it open, there's nothing there except energy patterns forming standing wave patterns, sort of like the sand on that plate with the vibrations making the sand particles dance around and form these geometric lines and patterns. That's a standing wave. It looks like it's something solid, but it's not. It's You look close enough, it's just dancing sand particles. It's the same thing in the quantum field. You look close enough at these standing waves, and it's some invisible something, a substance that's in a state of resonance, forming these patterns, these standing waves, and they nest together. And there's an infinite number of patterns in standing waves. So if you zoom back a bit, they coalesce together and they look like a Z boson. You zoom back far enough and they look like quarks and chimes and hadrons and leptons and atoms and compounds and people like you and me, except this is like, we know this is an illusion. We know that this is like a multi-dimensional sort of quantum movie with pixels that are the Planck length, the smallest possible thing you can imagine. You can't see through this illusion. You can only penetrate it with consciousness itself. And from the standpoint of the Vedas and the sutras of Patanjali and all these ancient texts, down at the core of the quantum field where we see these vibrations that are in states of standing waves, what's vibrating, that they used to call it a vacuum. We know it's not a vacuum. We know it's a substance. We know there's something there vibrating. Now they call it dark matter. I used to call it the ether, but they threw that word out when Einstein won the Nobel Prize for the electromagnetic effect and photons, and the word quantum came up. The photon, quantum of light. Most people don't realize that there is such a thing in the sound world as well. The phonon is the quantum particle of sound. And it's, most of all of this kind of starts in the womb, where, at some point your consciousness wakes up in the void, sort of like, who am I, where am I? But there's no words yet. There's no concept of language yet. It's just me and the void. And then between 16 and 24 weeks, my brain has developed to a point where all 5 senses come online for the first time. So here I am, this little fetus, 6 inches, 8 inches long, that's floating in body temperature amniotic fluid. We all start out in a float tank. And when the senses come online, I'm in the dark. So my eyes don't work, my nose and mouth don't work, they're filled with fluid. Sound, in the physics of sound travels through water 5 times better than it does through air. So the only thing that all of us experience in the very first 9 months of our life is sound and vibration. Sound through here, vibration through my skin, the largest sense organ I've got. The vibration sense network, 4 little skin sensors in here, they're sensitive vibration frequencies between 0.3 and 500 hertz. That's what the body considers to be vibration sense. 9 months in a float tank, amplified sound waves coming into your ears and your body. That is what we experience. We're all baptized in sound. Water brothers and sisters, But sound has been used in every culture. Every culture on earth has a sound tradition. And those sound traditions, from shamanic drumming, Tibetan bowls, and Chinese meditation gongs, and chant and mantra, all of them have been part of a tradition of re-spiritualizing our consciousness with sound waves. It hasn't really been a tradition of healing with sound. Healing has been in there, but the predominant use of sound throughout history in various cultures has always been to wake up. It's always been expanding self-awareness and consciousness. Now we've got unprecedented levels of expertise and technology in how we can measure what's going on under the hood here, how we can measure what's going on in the brain, how we can measure what's going on in the autonomic nervous system that automatically controls all my body systems, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system in the center of your brain in a place called the hypothalamus. And that kind of the automatic runs the show with sort of my rational thinking mind on top. And this part doesn't have a clue what's going on down here. I remember when I was going to chiropractic college and studying like a fiend to learn the wiring diagram of the brain and all the cells and the organs and the glands and the muscles and the biochemistry and all this stuff. And at a certain point, it struck me, excuse me, didn't I grow this myself? And why do I have to spend all this money and time to learn what it is I grew myself? It's like there's a biological organic intelligence that knows how to grow my body out of 2 cells, differentiate the tissues into what I am, and then make it all run on automatic without me thinking about it. From my standpoint, that's my real self. And who I think I am up here, who I think I am, is not me. It's something, it's part of me. Like my finger is part of me, it's me, but it's not me at the same time. My mind and who I think I am is a tool that who I really am uses for some purpose out here in the world to have conversations and fill out tax forms and go to a job and learn how to survive and all that stuff. But when I have a transformational spiritual experience, this is the part I come in contact with, my big mind, the part of me who knows how to grow this body out of 2 cells, the part of me who is tapped into a larger continuum of consciousness, as Carl Jung would call it, a collective unconscious that we all share. And that collective unconscious, all of us together, we are the ones who have our hand on the Ouija board, and we're the ones that's spelling out the next letter and the next word and the next sentence and producing the reality that we're experiencing. And this is not new. Although this is pointed out in quantum physics in the present time, but this is straight back to 4,000-year-old texts from India in Sanskrit. The sutras of Patanjali talk about this very specifically, that we create reality. Our quantum networked consciousness that we all share, we are making a decision that this is the world that we are projecting, which means the world that we've got right now is something that all of us in humanity are projecting out. We are making this happen. And for those of us who are deeply concerned about what's going on here, sort of like the whole world has been stolen by bad guys or something. It's really the eternal struggle between the light and the dark forces. And it's coming to a head, as it always does. It's once again a sine wave of vibration, except it's extended over centuries, hundreds of thousands of years. These grand cycles come together, and the forces of light and the forces of dark duke it out again, once again. And the forces of dark always have large quantities of asleep people to carry out those tasks. The people who don't question, the people who look to others to tell them what they should buy and what they should eat and how they should live their lives, and don't think twice about doing whatever it is they're told. And the forces of light are the forces of quality, quantity on the one hand and quality on the other hand. Consciousness has dimension, consciousness has weight, consciousness has mass, as in E equals mc squared. E equals m, energy equals matter. So from that standpoint, it's like consciousness represents the most refined form of matter, and matter is the most condensed form of spirit. It's all just one thing. So it behooves the light forces during times of chaos like this to align themselves together more precisely. and put themselves to the task of going into a state of consciousness where I can contact the present moment, where I can contact the quantum field before a thought in the present moment, where I stand on the brink of deciding what the next moment from now is going to be. The kind of thing that you see in spontaneous remission, by the way. When I see patients who've had spontaneous remissions, all of a sudden, you're supposed to die from cancer, and then all of a sudden it's gone, right? How long did it take to go, by the way? Like that. Because something about the emotion of the fear or the awakening that happens for some people in the face of the mortality teleports you to this profound spot in yourself, deep down in your unconscious mind, before a thought in the present moment, and you make a different decision. You change your expectation. I don't think I'm going to be that person who dies of cancer this time around. I think I'll create a different outcome. I think I'll expect the world for me to be the person who has this magical thing take place, and poof, it's gone. And all the patients who I've seen, all the friends I've known who've had that happen, the person who got the cancer actually died, and the person who was born out of that experience is a different person completely. That person is somebody who's come in contact very deeply and profoundly with, why am I here? What am I here to do? Why did the universe create me? My uniqueness, my unique set of talents that will never appear again, that has never happened before. Here I am, this unique thing, this unique puzzle piece who's got talents. What is my job? What am I here to do? And out of that experience, these people have come in contact with it. And they are on purpose. They're very clear. And they're lovely people to be around because it really centers you and puts you in your place. It's like, why do I have to get cancer in order to have that kind of experience, but now when we take the power of sound, which in reality is pure energy moving through a medium, and it's becoming apparent that when I went to school and learned that everything in the universe is on the electromagnetic spectrum, that's not true. Sound is not. Sound is the only thing in the universe that is not part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's not electromagnetism. It's a mechanical energy wave, pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency. And the medium is usually air molecules, like my voice is making air molecules bump together as they travel. Sound travels through water 5 times better than it does through air. Sound travels through a solid 5 times better than it does through water. It's pure energy moving through a medium. And if the frequency it happens to be between 20 and 20,000 hertz, then I invented this little mechanism and I call it sound. But when it's below 20 hertz, I invented another mechanism to interpret that. That's my vibrational sense network in my skin. 0.3 to 500 hertz. But when it's outside of that range, higher than 20,000 hertz or lower than 0.3 hertz, it's still this pure energy moving through a medium. We don't have a name for it. Science doesn't seem to pay much attention to it. It's a primal force. And now we know that we can affect consciousness with that force, and we know that we can affect healing with that force, particularly if the force is tuned specifically in harmonic relationships to density structures of my body. So the concept of being able to resonate my liver with a certain frequency, or my sympathetic nervous system with a certain frequency, or my brain waves, my state of consciousness with a certain frequency. The idea of brainwave entrainment, where we can entrain your brainwaves with sound frequencies to any state we wish. And it's all based on these laws of physics that we can kind of discuss. But now we've got these incredible EEG machines and brain mapping computers and sophisticated heart rate variability monitors that are used in medicine to predict death by heart attack or disease. As a matter of fact, it's the gold standard in modern medicine. You can nail your current state of health on a graph of 66 possible states of health with a medical grade heart rate variability device. And I have my own that I have a patent on. That's a real-time system. I can see your sympathetic, parasympathetic live on a computer screen, and I can see if it's balanced or not. And if it's not, I can make it balanced with a precisely tuned sound frequency accurate to a couple of decimal points. And the thing that I can actually say that and not get dragged away to the loony bin somewhere is a testament to where we are at in the 21st century, that we are on the brink of Star Trek medicine, Star Trek vibratory medicine, that with sound waves and light frequencies and electromagnetic fields. It's an amazing period to be around, with unprecedented tools at our disposal. The idea that the magnificence of the brain, they just a week and a half ago, there was an article about they've just discovered that the dumb neuron theory isn't really how it works. 800 billion neurons in my brain connected to other neurons with axons. And the more connections you have, the higher your IQ. Einstein's brain was 35% denser, heavier than normal brains. More axon connections, not more brain cells. That's like us. If we can all those of us with quote heavy consciousness, high quality people in the side of the light, if we can network ourselves together like brain cells network together with axons, the more people that we know and the more people that we network together under the hood in a collective way, the more power we have in numbers to actually change the quantum field. And at this point, what we need is a spontaneous remission planet-wide. Back in 4.5 billion years ago, when the Earth was still molten and comets and asteroids were crashing onto the Earth made of water, and we had ended up with a water planet. In the primordial ooze, there's the little single cell organisms duking it out for the food morsels, and all of a sudden something happened. Something descended on this, and various of these little bacteria began to combine together and form little communities, because they realized all of a sudden that it was a survival advantage to work together and cooperate rather than to compete, and form symbiotic relationships. And these symbiotic little tribes formed into communities, formed into multicellular organisms, and crawled out of the ocean and became you and me. Here we are. There's a massive multicellular organism, and a good portion of who we are is not even us. It's not even our DNA. It's foreign creatures with different DNA in symbiotic relationships with us. And now what we need is that same thing to descend upon all of us again, where we come to a realization as a species that we need to combine together in a new, higher dimensional way of symbiosis to form a massive planet-wide symbiotic relationship with one another and the planet and all the other living beings on the planet, and rebirth ourselves. Except this time it doesn't, nature doesn't supply it. The second time, it has to be a conscious effort. We have to do it this time. And when we look at the kind of sort of EEG equipment that we've got out there now, these brain mapping computers, and not only can we tell what brain frequencies are present, but we can tell where in the brain they're happening. Grand patterns begin to show up in how brainwaves work together and form patterns of consciousness. These sort of brain mapping computers can show us topographical colored maps of where brain activities are going on in the brain, and we can start to get patterns of what different states of consciousness look like in the brain, where they repeat certain types of patterns. C. Maxwell Cade, this British EEG researcher in the 60s, took his portable EEG machine, the Mind Mirror, and hooked up meditators all over the world looking for what does enlightenment look like in the brain. And he saw this pattern down here show up so many times, where the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere have, beta and alpha and theta and delta all present at the same time in different amplitudes, with the right left hemispheres being synchronized. A pattern that he called the awakened mind. I wrote a book about it. C. Maxwell Cade. The Dalai Lama did a whole research project at the University of Wisconsin. He took these meditators who had been meditating for 30 years. And, what showed up was massive amplitudes of gamma brain activity, and gamma, and another brainwave that's just been discovered in 2001. It's cutting edge of neuroscience right now. Gamma brain activity and the default mode network. Default mode network, these 4 zones in the brains that are tightly synchronized together at extremely slow brain frequency, 1 pulse every 10 to 20 seconds. And that now has been shown that when these 4 zones come unsynchronized, there's all these neurological conditions that show up. ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, epilepsy, bipolar disorder. All of these things come about when these start to come unsynchronized, but when they're hypersynchronized, it's extremely high states of meditation. Cosmic consciousness. It's where I get my sense of self on the inside of my skin. That's this zone. On the outside of my skin is this zone. My sense of time, my sense of the present, is the past versus the future. And when those get synchronized, I get my normal sense of myself in time and space. But if I start to hypersynchronize those, then that borderline becomes indistinct. It's like all of a sudden it seems like the inside of my body is universally large, and the present moment extends into all past and future events. And we can use sound waves and brainwave entrainment to entrain your brainwaves to just that state. Once we know what it looks like on EEG, we can use brain entrainment to bring you there. It doesn't mean that, if we find a pattern of enlightenment in EEG and we entrain your brains to that, brainwaves to that exact same pattern, doesn't mean you're going to get instant enlightenment. What it does mean is that we have highly precise scientific training wheels to put you precisely where you need to be, so that when that door opens, you're there. We can accelerate this process. Rather than going to a monastery and struggling for 20 to 30 years to figure out what I'm supposed to do. Nobody can tell you what to do exactly. But with brain entrainment and scientific tools, we don't have to tell you what to do. We can bring you there. We can place you there. And if we place you there over and over and over again, we've got to learn neurological response. We're going to a gym for enlightenment, sort of 21st century scientific monastery, so to speak. Of course, you have to be a little careful about how you use all these things, but the earliest example of brain entrainment was, probably shamanic drumming. I've done extensive research with this in my laboratory. Recordings of shamans doing drum ceremonies to change consciousness. You can time these drums in recording studio software. It's about 5 hertz. It's a brainwave frequency. You're pounding the drum at a brain frequency where your brain goes when you're dreaming at night, theta. That means we can take your beta function of 20 hertz and it will slow down and slow down and slow down to match that drum beat, because that's how my body clocks work. And we can take you from a waking state to a dream state in 2 or 3 minutes without going to sleep first. That's a classic definition of a trance state or a deep meditation state. done with early science or Tibetan bowls. When you play one of these bowls, there's this beautiful sound coming out, but inside that sound is a pulsing, and that pulsing is a brainwave speed. So these guys even knew that 3,000 years ago. You know, just when I think I've got all this fancy equipment around me and I'm, you know, proud of my cutting edge recording studio and brain entrainment, all the other stuff I'm doing, I find out that Tibetans did it 3,000 years ago. It's like, what? Or these little tinshas down here. This is actually 4 bells, a big bell and a small bell. And these 2 tones create a binaural beat to entrain your brainwaves. And so do these 2. And then those interact. The big bells and the small bells, and the big and small and the big and small, they all interact and form a mini brain pattern, just like C. Maxwell Cade was doing with the awakened mind. They even knew that. How did they know that? This is where it all started. This article in 1973 in Scientific American, Auditory Beats in the Brain by Gerald Oster. The experiments this guy did with using sound for brain entrainment has rocked the world. I mean, he's the one who started the whole thing of brain entrainment soundtracks for changing consciousness. And his, you know, his experiments were astounding. He was using 2 sine waves. First of all, he proved that pounding the drum at a brain speed would change your brain picture. And then he did it with phantom pulses. 2 sine waves tuned together slightly out of tune create a pulse. And if they're tuned just right, the pulse is a brain speed, and your brain waves will time themselves to that too. It's a phantom pulse. 100 hertz and 105 out of 2 speakers creates a 5 cycle a second modulation in air molecules. Your brain waves entrain to it. But if you got headphones on, because that was his next experiment here, headphones, what happens if you've got headphones? If I have 2 binaural beats, 1 tone and 1 tone slightly out of tune, 100 and 105, slightly out of tune, I hear this 5 cycle a second pulse, but there's no air molecules now colliding. My brain is manufacturing that pulse out of nowhere because it's expecting it to be there. And it forces my right-left hemispheres to synchronize. And synchronizing is a big deal. It's where, you know, epiphanies happen from. It's where the problem gets solved. It's where new, original, out-of-the-box creative ideas happen. It drops in, and this happens. But now when we've got headphones on with these binaural beat things going, this is present for prolonged periods of time for the first time in our biological evolutionary history. And when we do that often, we're exercising an ability to be in this epiphany zone. 100 and 105 coming out of a speaker, the crossover zone creates a 5 hertz pulse in the air molecules, and we entrain to that. This idea of this pulse that's coming out of these bowls is because the curve of this bowl creates different frequencies at this diameter and another frequency at this diameter, and they interact together and create a binaural beat within a single bowl. That's the pulsing you hear with a Tibetan bowl. And the interaction of this, you know, a large bell and a small bell in all kinds of different ways create a brainwave entrainment pattern when you bang these 2 little bells together. So it's mind-blowing. I was approached by NASA at one point with sounds from space from Voyager 1 and 2. I was doing experiments myself with human voices in sampling keyboards, where you can plug a microphone into the back of a keyboard and record any sound and play that sound across the keyboard. So I was doing it with Tibetan bowls, Tibetan bowl symphonies, and crickets and birds and whales and dolphins, and playing dolphin symphonies. If you take a 6-inch bowl and you record that and stick it on middle C in your electronic keyboard, it spreads it across the keyboard. And when I play C an octave lower, the computer inside the keyboard will slow the recording down by exactly half speed to make an octave lower. So it's like a 6-inch bowl becomes a 12-inch bowl, and then an octave lower it becomes a 24-inch bowl. An octave lower it becomes a 4-foot diameter bowl, 8-foot diameter bowl, 16-foot diameter bowl, and the high harmonics are being slowed down to a point where you can hear them, and they sound like monks chanting. And I'm thinking, wow. When you put voices, people speaking sentences in there, and you speed them up, first it's sort of Alvin the Chipmunk. But then if you keep speeding it up, it becomes birds. Human voices sound like birds. And you keep speeding it up, it sounds like crickets. You keep speeding it up, it sounds like dolphins. And cricket recordings slow down, sound like birds, and birds slow down, sound like dolphins, and dolphins slow down, sound like people singing. It's like, no wonder we can't talk to the dolphins. We're talking at the wrong speed. But I was doing this thing with Tibetan bowls and a Tibetan bowl sort of symphony. And I want to play you a piece of that. This helps if you've got headphones on. I'm also going to play a piece at the end, a 5-minute piece for opening up the heart chakra. It's called Heartstrings. And it's also best with headphones. This one is best with headphones because there's a lot of low frequencies. I've slowed some of these down, but this is kind of a Tibetan bowl symphony. So let's listen to this for a second. Crazy. Well, we're not done because I was approached by this scientist from TRW who worked with NASA and JPL, and I came with these recordings from Voyager 1 and 2, Sounds from Space. And when he showed up, he had this cassette tape. This is back in 1989, 88, 89. The first space sounds I heard from Voyager, these are interactions between the solar wind and the ionosphere. It's charged electromagnetic particles colliding together, resonating. And the resonance is exactly within the range of human hearing in space. So Saturn and Jupiter and Uranus and Neptune and their rings and their moons all have these frequencies that were recorded by Voyager 1 and 2. But this one was the first one I heard when I put headphones on. It's the rings of Uranus. So once again, I recommend headphones. This also lasts for about a minute. I mean, this might just be me because I'm in this field, but that sounds an awful lot like Tibetan bowls to me coming from space. The whole thing is sort of mind-blowing. And the other planets, what do they sound like? They sound like dolphins and birds and monks chanting and Tibetan bowls and airy, breathy choirs of angels singing. It's just mind-boggling. Sort of like Jung's collective unconscious made manifest, where you stretch it this way and you've got a planet, and you stretch it that way, you've got a cricket, and this way you've got a person, and that way you've got a dolphin. It's the collective unconscious mind. It's the holographic nature of the fractalization of the universe and everything in it. In this case, it's size scales or speed scales. The connectome in my brain, the connection of neurons, the axons, form a pattern, and that pattern looks remarkably like the cosmic pattern of connections, in the universe, that connect galaxies and stuff like that together. And this whole thing of brainwaves, where these electrical depolarizations of my neurons, they happen in sync with each other. And they sweep across the cortex in these synchronized waves. That's why it's called brainwaves. And it turns out that the speed of these depolarizations of sweeps across the cortex, the speed of those depolarizations of those brainwaves are closely associated with consciousness itself. So if you're going to make 25 sweeps per second, that's what we call beta, external focused attention. But if they slow down and hit 13 sweeps per second, 13 hertz and below, now we're in alpha. We're in the inside realm of mental activity. It's more holographic. It's peripheral vision. It's not single focus. And if we slow down below 7 hertz, we end up in theta, which is where dreaming takes place. Creativity happens there. And if we slow further down below below 4 or so, or 3.5, that's delta. That's where we go in deepest sleep, physical recuperation. I discovered a brain frequency in 1989 with the EEG I was doing with all my patients that was below delta. I called it epsilon. People had out-of-the-body experiences, precognitive. I was part of a graduate school research center, the California Institute for Human Science. We did experiments with that. We could prove that if we listen to brain entrainment with epsilon, brain frequencies below delta, that we could boost precognitive ability. So we did a experiment with 40 patients in 3 groups, and we could and the Xander card test with these 5 cards with big symbols on them, like triangles and squares and wavy lines. You shuffle the deck and you try to, grok which card is going to come up, precognitive. And we could boost that ability to predict which card was going to come up by 373%. By listening to a 15-minute soundtrack of brain entrainment in epsilon. So this epsilon thing had to do with, epiphanies and out-of-the-body experiences and precognitive ability, sort of metaphysical experiences. And then there's gamma, excuse this picture, but gamma was discovered in the late 80s in open brain surgery, where they had the electrodes right on the brain itself. And then all of a sudden they could pick up these incredible frequencies, 40 hertz gamma, 100 hertz, 200 hertz brain activity. It's like, whoa, because in regular, the brain activity, the big 4, so to speak, beta, alpha, theta, delta, the more brain frequencies you want to make per second, the lower the amplitude gets, because you have to make 30 of them. So the energy goes into making 30. But if you only have to make 2 or 3, the amplitude is huge because energy is packed into the amplitude. So when you get up to something like 40 hertz gamma, the amplitude is so unbelievably small that it can't penetrate the skull anymore, so nobody could ever discover it with normal EEG. So all of a sudden, when they got the electrodes right on the brain itself, they picked up all these frequencies. Later, gamma, through a whole series of research reports, is a global reset of the whole cortex. It was called associated with cognitive consciousness because it's the only brain frequency that disappears under general anesthesia. It's also called the binding frequency. It pulls the information from various areas of the cortex where the five senses are stored, right? So the hearing center is here in the temporal lobe, the visual center is in the occipital lobe, and smell is here, and vibration sense is the precentral gyrus, the sensory cortex, and gamma pulls all that information from all these various areas and binds it all together. So it's called the binding frequency. But how does it do that? They've just discovered this a year and a half ago. The 40 hertz gamma combines with theta brain activity, which happens between 4 and 8. It combines with that, modulates it, and creates a frequency modulation. Frequency modulation, that's FM. That's FM radio. That's how radio is broadcast. Frequency modulation. So what's happening here is gamma is combining with theta, modulating it and lifting it right out of the brain and binding all this information in an internet wireless connection network in the brain. Wireless connection in the brain. A brain cloud. How cool is that? That's what the Dalai Lama discovered when he brought his monks to the University of Wisconsin and hooked them up to fMRI machines and brain mapping computers. What did they see? These guys have been meditating for 30 years. High amplitudes of gamma. And now we realize that gamma is associated with a certain state of consciousness through a Tibetan Buddhist meditation technique. And every single type of brain frequency you can identify is a different meditation technique from a different culture. For instance, alpha, associated with Zen meditation. You're sitting on a pillow and you know that you're here. You know you can concentrate on your breathing and the sounds coming from the window and the smell in the air and the breeze on your skin. All of this stuff is peripheral vision, and none of it has any more importance than anything else. It's like a big mandala. It's alpha. Zen is an alpha state, and shamanic journeying is a theta state. I'm not aware I'm in my body. I'm not aware I'm in a room. I'm climbing a mountain. I'm meeting a shaman who's giving me a secret. And now we know that gamma is associated with a certain Tibetan Buddhist technique. Here at my center, Center for Neuroacoustic Research, we've identified 21 different brain states that we use clinically, and also as sort of a high-tech form of boosting meditation to all these different sort of states. I need a few days with everybody to get into all this stuff in detail. Here's the default mode network with the 4 zones that I was talking about. These 4 zones go down between the hemispheres as well on the inside of the cortex. But look at this, proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Meditation experiences associated with differences in the default mode network activity and connectivity, hypersynchronizing the 4 zones, cosmic consciousness. Psychology Today, mind wandering and mindfulness. That's what's going on under the hood. 95% of all brain function is the default mode function under the hood. 5% off the top is you and me having this conversation. We think that everything we've experienced in our cognitive consciousness state is what it all is. That's just 5% off the top. 95% is under the hood, this default mode function of the 4 zones. Increased default mode network connectivity associated with meditation. Non-directive meditation activities default mode network, and areas associated with memory retrieval and emotional processing, hardwired into the limbic system. Meditation and neuroplasticity, self-directed neuroplasticity, default mode. Neuroplasticity means we can change how our brain is wired. Transcendental meditation activities, default mode activates the default mode network. Impact of meditation training on the default mode network during a restful state. Social, cognitive, and affective neuroscience. I mean, this is major stuff here. This is the new science of enlightenment. The fact that we can combine different kinds of frequencies together to create a chord, and that different kinds of chords are the language of emotions, major chords and minor chords and augmented chords and sevenths, and all of those are subtle shades of emotions. When we hear this kind of music, it can evoke emotions directly in the limbic system. So if you're a composer and you compose you go into a certain state of emotion in yourself, the music that comes from you out of that state communicates that through a higher order of entrainment to anyone who listens to it, who's got any kind of sensitivity. You push that emotion in them as well. You just communicated what that is. And if you combine that with science, so now we're building inside that musical track brain entrainment frequencies that put your brainwaves to a very specific state that we know on EEG is associated with this and this and this and this state of consciousness. We're now in an unprecedented ability to pick the conscious states we wish and exercise them and use neuroplasticity to regrow the pathways in our brain around the kind of states of consciousness we wish to have. It means we can boost things like IQ, memory, learning, creativity. I did that with Mattel and Cisco and Nike and Google, hired to boost creativity and problem solving by entraining people to theta with headphones that cause synchronicity, where new creative ideas happen, and combine it in a sound chair that comes through your body with light glasses that are translated by the sound, so you're seeing what you're hearing, what you're feeling. And we did independent scored testing from another company that could prove we could boost creativity by 20% in 6 weeks. Mattel won Innovative Toy Design of the Year. I ended up on the cover of Wall Street Journal. This is real stuff. It's our abilities to pick the lock of neural programs and make them run. Our ability to use high-tech monitoring equipment of the autonomic nervous system here and balance the basic control system that tells all organs and glands in your body what to do, right here in the hypothalamus. Our little organelles, here's the hypothalamus, here's the pituitary gland, here's the pineal gland, here's the hypothalamus. This anterior hypothalamic nucleus right here is the center of the parasympathetic nervous system. It's where its origin is. It eventually comes down in a nerve that exits out the brainstem down here as the vagus nerve. The posterior hypothalamic nuclei, this one is the sympathetic nervous system. Suprachiasmatic nucleus here is the center of the body clocks. This is where brain entrainment comes from. We can see here the anterior nucleus, parasympathetic nervous system. Posterior nucleus, sympathetic nervous system. Sorry. Suprachiasmatic nucleus, that's the center of the body clocks. And I have a special heart rate variability device that I can tune sound frequencies to balance the autonomic nervous system to the zero stress point called homeostasis, for sort of an advanced sound healing program. There's bigger fish to fry, because if more than one person has headphones on and listens to the same brainwave entrainment soundtrack, we've just created a scientific mind link where your brainwaves are going to exactly the same place together. And this is new. This has never been possible in all of human history before. Even when we get, grand meditation groups, even on the internet, meditating for world peace, it's like herding cats. No two people in that group are going to the same state. Everybody's got their own ideas and their own abilities to meditate. But now we've got the possibility of using the internet with headphones and large groups of people together, where we can create a single soundtrack with brain entrainment to a very high state, like the default mode network. And we can link everybody's brain waves exactly and precisely to the same exact brain state. Where now we're using science to link the collective unconscious mind together. There's power in numbers. And it's always been that way in the light and dark forces. The light forces require us to align our high levels of consciousness and understanding together precisely to flip the quantum field and have a spontaneous remission. So that's pretty much what I'm up to in my own live stream broadcasts I do every week. This address here, you can go to this address and see all the live streams I've done up to this point. I do them every Sunday at 12:30 California time. Except this next week, it'll be on Monday because I'm teaching a practitioner workshop in the sound work I've just been talking about with the heart rate variability. So Saturday and Sunday, I'm teaching this practitioner's workshop. So this live stream gets moved to Monday this week, and then all returns back to Sunday again. But we're going to do that same kind of thing right now. I have a 5-minute soundtrack that I've created, I call Heartstrings. And this lasts for about 4.5 minutes. It's best with headphones, because with headphones, we're getting the whole 3D thing, and we're getting the synchronizing of the hemispheres. And because we're all listening at the same time, we're getting this phenomenon I'm talking about, where we're linking everybody's brainwaves together to exactly and precisely the same place. And in that place, we have the possibility of changing things at a quantum field level. So if you'll join me for this 4.5-minute little meditation, this is specifically designed to open the heart chakra. It's called Heartstrings. I have 3D information that resonates inside the skull at the pineal gland, so you'll sort of feel things moving around inside your head with 3D processing. And then the binaural beats are a pattern, a brain pattern that has to do with the default mode network to hypersynchronize those 4 zones. That's what we're up to right here. So close your eyes, and here we go. So, peace and love and joy to everyone. Thank you all for being with me here for this short period of time. I think that we're going to have a conversation with Jim is going to open this up to perhaps questions or something. I do see the chat feed here. By the way, somebody asked me what kind of headphones do I have, and these are AKGs. I've got a reference headphones, K701s is what these are. They're very nice headphones, about $300. They're studio monitor headphones.
Mine are significantly less money, but I had a good acoustical experience.
Yeah.
Listening.
Headphones really make it.
Yeah. So, just to kick off our discussion, Jeff, is, it reminded me of what Joe Dispenza says in terms of the fact that science is the new language of mysticism.
Yeah, science discovers God.
Yeah. And then it also, in discovering God, as you're pointing out, it allows us a lot of capacity to move into our own interiority with real specificity.
Yes.
For the kind of healing therapies that we know are there, which empowers us to create the kind of intention that can produce sort of the placebo effect, assuming the right conditions and so forth. And so I just want to acknowledge that dimension of yours. Many
sort of
people
just in time too.
Pardon?
Sort of just in time. All
Totally.
of these things get dished up at the same time. The problem always comes with its solution at the same time. I just think that what I've seen with the live streams that I'm doing, it's not enough just to use the science of global brain entrainment together with large groups, where we can get to this precision we have to have in order to align our consciousness to the same states so that we can have that possibility of shifting the quantum field to a new reality, whatever it is we want. The question is now, what do you want? It's what kind of world do we want? When it's left to itself under no management, then this is the world we get. It always falls to its lowest common denominator, and it will always seek its path of least resistance, because entropy is that rule. There's the yin yang. Entropy is on the one hand trying to pull everything apart to its component pieces, and the active force of life is the assembler that takes those pieces and builds them up together and maintains that. And those two are in a constant complementary tension with each other. Life is always moving against the counterforce of entropy. And if life is not doing that, if life is passive and not actively assembling, then entropy will take over. And if we don't have an intention of a goal or a plan, if I'm not putting pressure, if I don't have a vision of what I want in my own life,
right,
or in the world, if I don't have a vision of what I'm moving towards, then I'm passive and the universe becomes active, and I'm a cork floating in the ocean, and we end up with whatever we end up with. That's the world where we are. We have not had a force of consciousness to push, so the forces of entropy and the dark forces have taken over, and we end up where we are, the lowest common denominator, and it's not getting any better. It's time, at times like this, I mean, we're all here on purpose. We chose this. We're here because we have answers. each one of us that is part of this kind of community of people who would tune into something like this are people who have different levels of understanding that I have a puzzle piece. I've got a piece. You've got a piece. Every single person who's here has got a piece. I don't know what that piece is, but you do. If you dig deep enough, you'll find out what your piece is and contribute it to the whole where we align it all together. And then the puzzle piece all comes together and makes this big picture. And now we are an active force that's putting pressure on the universe, and the universe becomes passive. The universe says, oh, you want to do something? Well, that's what I'm here for. Tell me what you want. The kahunas in Hawaii have that as an idea, the kahuna prayer, the idea that God grants all prayers. Therefore, my present experience is what I prayed for in the past. And prayer happens before a thought. So it's not here. It has no power. It's here, and it's a sort of a visualization process. But the kahunas always admonish people. If you're going to go into this kahuna prayer where you deposit that prayer in the universe and all prayers get answered, then you have to know what you want. And if you think about it, what kind of life do I want? And what kind of world do I want? There's not too many people in all of the world who actually have ever spent any time fleshing that out. There's kind of an amorphous, like fuzzy idea that I want some kind of utopia, but I haven't actually nailed it. Or even with my own life. All I've got is terms of, I don't want to be sick anymore. I don't want to be poor anymore. I don't want to be alone anymore. That's not it. That's not how you define it. And that's not how we as a community have to define it. If we can use science to align ourselves together, well, here we are, but now what are we going to ask the universe for? God says, hey, you can have anything you want. All you have to do is ask for it without words before a thought. But first you got to kind of know what you want. So
Sure.
It becomes this process of refining just the act of spending time to flesh out what kind of a world I'd like to have in itself is a waking up experience. It's getting me in touch with the deeper part of myself that I normally don't talk with. There's something valuable about that. And you can use brain entrainment soundtracks to put you exactly in the brain state where it makes it real easy to find out what that is.
And that's the technology that you have developed.
The technology is now putting me into this place where instead of me having to come up with what kind of world I want, all I have to do is open myself up for the universe to fill me up with the correct idea that I'm here for. Yeah. I'm too small to know what that's supposed to look like. And as that's back to the kahuna prayer, it says, if you want the love of your life to show up, right? And you've got this detailed list of like, this person has to have this color hair and eyes and this body build and this job description and this kind of personality. God's up there going, well, this is quite a detailed list. It's going to take me a couple of lifetimes to fill this for you, you know. But if you center on what you're really looking for in that relationship, you're looking for something here. You're looking for this love sensation. You're looking for this feeling, this shared thing, this magic thing that you're looking for. If that's all that I'm doing, and God's up there going, no problem. I'll have this dished up by this afternoon. That's where you kind of realize, oh, I always thought that she would have blonde hair. Whatever idea got up here has got nothing to do with the big picture of how of right. When it gets delivered, you know.
So let me ask you. There's a couple of questions about the nature of sound in relationship to someone, for example, like Mozart or Bach. Why is Mozart, for example, so effective in the use of sound? What is he doing, or what did he do that really gave him the potency that he's had over centuries now? Because there's good sound and kind of bad sound in the sense that some is constructive, some is destructive. Talk to us a little bit about, because they've done these experiments with plant where you give them rock and roll and the plants die, but you give them Mozart and the plants flourish. What's going on there?
Yeah, that I think the greatest composers, or the greatest artists in general, but the greatest composers are the ones who could enter into a certain state of consciousness. They enter into a certain place in their consciousness where they arrive at this emotional state, and then they pull their music from that state. And anybody who hears that music experiences that same state. That's what I call higher order entrainment, like higher order beyond science entrainment. This is big science. This is sort of continuum science. And so the great composers, Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms and Schubert, and they had the ability to go to this place in themselves and pull the music from there. It's not even something that you're driven to do. You have to do it. It's your nature. This is why you're here. You have to do it. You go to this place and you pull the music from it. And the mediocre and the bad are the people who are trying to do it, I don't know, to make a living as a musician. You're trying to compose music that people will like so that they'll sell. That's a wholly different ballgame. Whether you ever sell an album or not has nothing to do with the idea of going to the space you have to go to pull something out of it. They're explorers in a sort of another conscious realm. And so for me, as a composer, as a musician, that's my task. If I want to make music that's going to be effective, in its fullest sense of the word, and I'll say I want to entrain you to a theta state, then I need to be able to go into a theta state myself and pull the music from there. And how I do it, I have a unique way of building binaural beats into music. It's different than anybody else. Everybody else uses two sine waves like Gerald Oster did in his scientific experiment. He was using two sine waves because he was a scientist and he needed man-made tones with no harmonics, least number of variables for a scientific experiment. But sine waves are awful to listen to. They're devoid of content. They're devoid of harmonics. They're just plain tones. So you see that in the various soundtracks that are out there in the market, they try to cover them over with nature sounds. So you've got something nice to listen to, or music. The way I do it is because I'm creating my own instrument sounds from scratch and electronic keyboards, fantasy flute sound, made from 120 harmonics I assemble together to make a certain timbre. I can go inside those harmonics that makes the flute sound like a flute, and I can untune various harmonics in a stereo field and build binaural beats inside the instrument sound itself, and not as separate sine waves, where only the sine waves are doing the entrainment and the music is something pleasant to listen to while this does its work. This is now gone. The binaural beats are built inside the harmonics of every sound you're hearing on the soundtrack. So wherever your mind goes, it's being entrained. So that means that I can do it inside bird chirps and water sounds and dolphin sounds, and I can build it into any sound. I could take a recording of you doing a visualization session, just your voice, and I could build the harmonics into the harmonics of your voice in a stereo field, and there'd be binaural beats inside your voice as you speak, and you'd never know it, but it's entraining your brainwaves at the same time. There's a level of scientific approach to sound now that's completely out of the box. And there's not too many people out there doing it. I mean, it blows my mind that, but I have to understand that I'm this unique kind of character on the scene. I started out as a musician and an artist. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. I went to art school in the 60s. 4 years of art school and sculpture and filmmaking, and I was a musician, and all that stuff, and then I ended up going to chiropractic school, and now I'm a doctor, and somehow all of this stuff came together.
How did you
so
get
now I'm
what was your
sort of
pathway,
doctor.
Jeff, to discover the efficacy of sound? Was it something that just attracted you when you were a little boy? Were you
Oh
always
yeah,
musical? And so it was
I was,
after art school that you began to really think sort of intellectually about the mystery and power of sound.
well, I had been interested in that through the years in my esoteric sort of spiritual quest. I mean, um, that was always part of it. Um,
Mhm.
so when you see somebody like a Mozart who creates his first symphony at 4, I mean, that to me is the clearest example of past lives. I mean, he already did that stuff. He already worked there. You get born with the things that you've worked for in the past, and he
Yeah.
just was continuing on what he was doing the day he died, right? Composing stuff. Um, so all of us come in with that. So when I come in and I'm anything that I can make music on, I make music on, and anything I can draw on, I draw on.
Mm.
This is stuff I've done before. I brought that with me. That's a talent that I already had over lifetimes or whatever. Uh, and at a certain point, when it all gelled together, when I graduated and got into practice, these things come to me. I mean, this heart rate variability system I've got that I'm using to balance your nervous system with sound waves. I'm a faculty member in a graduate school research center, and there's a knock on my door, and some guy is there. Never seen this guy before. He's an older man, and he's saying, "You're Dr. Jeff Thompson." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've seen you in the news, and I've got this device kicking around in my garage, and I'd like to give it to somebody who might be able to use it." I said, "Well, okay, what is it?" It's called heart rate variability. I'm going, "What's that?" And he gives it to him and he walks away. I'm saying, "Yeah, I'm interested. How much do you want?" I'm not looking to sell it. That's how the heart rate variability thing started. When I was at a critical point of whether I should go to chiropractic school, move all the way to Iowa, from Virginia. From New York State, upper New York State. If I should move to Iowa and go to school, and I'm talking myself out of it. And so my sort of circle of elders up there, said, "We're going to have to do something because he's not going where he's supposed to go. So they burned my house down. So there goes all my films and all my cameras and my musical instruments and all my artwork, everything I'd ever done, all up in smoke. The insurance money is just enough that I can go to school and travel light."
Yeah.
Right. So I'm drafted to this job. I mean, I get to, after I graduate, I go to Virginia, stay with my parents because I was broke. I take the board exams. I get the dream job of all time in the largest holistic health center in Virginia. This is the universe saying yes to you. This is the universe opening doors, turning lights green. You're in something bigger than you when you step on that path. It's bigger than you. You're being pulled along, and then it's a huge clinic and a huge practice with every kind of holistic technique under one roof. And at a certain point, all of a sudden I'm making money. I'm seeing 40 patients a day in a huge clinic. And then the guy who owns that clinic, who became my mentor, this incredible guy, ends up in an investment scheme that blows up in his face, and he's forced into bankruptcy. And me and the other greenhorn bought that clinic for a song and a dance from the bankruptcy court. And all of a sudden, in my first year of practice, I've got the largest holistic center in the whole state landed in my lap. This is the universe saying yes to you. It's like, oh my God. And I realized at one point, I'm making enough money now that I could probably go down and get a bank loan and outfit my spare room in my house with a kick-ass recording studio and make an album something I've always wanted to do as a musician. I could make an album. I could do this. I'll give them away for birthday presents for the rest of my life, but at least I did that. So I do it. Buy all this fancy schmancy equipment, stick it in my spare room, racks of equipment, super cool electronic keyboard and reel-to-reel recorders and all that stuff. And my wife at the time wants me to work on her back because, oh, that's right, I'm a chiropractor. That's right. So I pop up my spare table and my chiropractic table in the spare room, like I always do, and put her on the table. And all of a sudden I realized I just got set up. I've got a patient on a treatment table in a recording studio. Right? And I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if I could make a chiropractic adjustment with a sound wave. Each vertebra is a different shape, density, and mass. You should be able to find a frequency for an individual vertebra and resonate just that one. So I started doing that experiment, found a frequency for L5, put a speaker on her back and cranked the sound up. And in 2 minutes, she had no more pain and it didn't test out anymore. So I just fixed it with the sound wave.
Oh, wow.
And I realized that little decision, I wonder if I can, became a defining moment in my life. This little idea that I didn't even think about had any importance opened a door that I stepped through that is now me here talking to you. It became this unimaginable journey.
Extraordinary.
That I could bring back to the largest holistic health center in Virginia and experiment with. Right? Then I realized, hey, I can resonate individual bones in the cranium and do cranial sacral work with sound. I can resonate your liver. I can resonate every vertebra in your body. I can resonate your chakras. I can resonate your emotions. I can resonate your brain. Once I got to the brain, I realized, wait a second, if I'm finding the fundamental frequency for the brain and it normalizes its function, what its function is to tell everybody else what to do. It's the master control system that tells all systems what to do. So now the big holistic idea descends on me. Like, if you have a problem with your liver or your L5 or your chakra or whatever, your meridian, it's not their fault. Nobody works independently. Everything works as a highly synchronized symbiotic unit, and who's controlling the symbiosis of all of that is the autonomic nervous system. And if it's got a problem, if it becomes imbalanced, everybody's got a problem.
Right.
And whoever's the weak link in your genetic chain is who's going to be the biggest problem. Right? If your liver is your weak spot, that's where it's going to show up. And then there's the concept of running a stress program all the time. If you're locked into a fight or flight response all the time, which I say most people in the 21st century are.
Totally.
The 21st century is a marathon of stress for a body that was developed for a sprint. Then you're running a fight or flight response all the time, and that pulls the energy from your gut, elimination system, immune system, higher brain centers. It kicks your adrenals, raises your blood pressure. Adrenaline suppresses pancreas, so you have extra glucose to fight for your life. 2 biggest prescription medications: blood pressure, pre-diabetes pills. Most complete misdiagnosis. It's runaway adrenals. You bring the fight or flight response going all the time. You break that vicious cycle and return it to normal, and the adrenals return to normal. Blood pressure and blood sugar go back to normal. This is the kind of stuff I see in my clinic all the time. And people go out and tell their friends, "Oh, Dr. Thompson cured my diabetes." Excuse me, that you never had diabetes. That was a complete misdiagnosis. Nothing wrong with your heart. They're giving you a diuretic. How they're controlling blood pressure is by controlling the fluid balance from your kidneys. And what does it do if you take it for too long? Kills your kidneys. 90% of people on dialysis are there from their blood pressure medication, killed their kidneys. And why? Because they were running a fight or flight response all the time, and the adrenals were higher, kicking up their blood pressure as it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Don't get me started down this road. I want to throw something at the wall. It's so profoundly missing the point. It's
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
modern medicine viewpoint is still locked in Newtonian physics, and we're already way beyond that. I mean, 2 years ago, the scientific community made a international statement, news release. Global science now recognizes two things to be true. Consciousness is a requirement for reality to exist. That statement throws out Newtonian physics right out the window. There is no objective universe. It's no longer recognized that there is an objective universe. As people aren't here to witness what's going on, nothing's going on. There's a potential for the universe to be there, but only until consciousness arrives to witness something. So the Newtonian view is there's an objective universe, whether people are here or not. That means if nobody's here to witness it, there are still planets and nebula and galaxies and planets with rocks on them. But from a quantum standpoint, not true. Unless somebody's there to witness, there is nothing there. It's just a potential to be. It's Schrodinger's cat paradox.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have the box with the lid and the cat's inside with a bottle of cyanide and hammer suspended above it. You shake it, and either the hammer drops or it doesn't drop. And actually what happens is the cat enters into a twilight zone state of living / dead cat, a potential to be something, but not yet until consciousness arrives on the scene. Consciousness hasn't arrived on the scene because the lid is closed. So I'm going to put that box down. I'm a scientist, take some notes. 2 minutes later, I'm going to lift the lid and see what happened. We'll say there's a dead cat. Oh, okay, so when I shook the box 2 minutes ago, the cat died. No, that's not what happened. When I shook the box 2 minutes ago, the cat entered into the twilight zone state. It wasn't until 2 minutes later when I lifted the lid and consciousness arrived on the scene that one of those two possibilities popped into existence, which means that I just created the past event right now. And that was the second statement from the scientific community. Consciousness is a requirement for reality to exist. And number two, the present creates the past. There's a scientist here in San Diego, Fred Alan Wolf, the guy who is in What the Bleep Do I Know, that movie. He took on the Schrodinger cat paradox. Let's update the paradox because the cat in the box doesn't relate to people too well. So the closed box is the next moment from now. And we're going to arrive there. The lid's going to fly off. Consciousness is going to arrive on the scene. And what's in the box is not a cat. It's an infinite field of all possibilities. Anything that could possibly happen, stretching to infinity, all with an equal weight. That means technically we could be jellyfish in another dimension in the next moment from now, instead of me saying my next word. The question is, why is it always my next word? Why is it always a continuation, moment by moment by moment, of recreating this with me in a body, saying words, and you over there, and surrounded by stuff? And because I'm not arriving on the scene of the next moment with a clear slate. I've got an agenda. I have a belief system. My belief system is I live in a body and I'm surrounded by stuff and I'm saying something. That's my belief system, and it's very strong. And therefore, I just created an outcome in the infinite field of possibilities. One outcome is now special because I think that's the one that should be happening. And that's exactly what the universe is always looking for, the path of least resistance to save energy. I just gave it its marching orders. The universe says, which one should I choose? I say, choose that one. It says, okay. So that's what I'm talking about. When we're all doing that as a collective unconscious level, we believe this is the way the world is because we're convinced, because the body seems solid, but we know in our mind it's not. We know it's an illusion, right? We know this is an illusion. From the standpoint of quantum physics, moment by moment by moment, I'm recreating this reality from scratch. that I'm 73 years old and I've got proof. Look at all my stuff, right? I've got albums of pictures and photographs and people who've known me most of my life, who can, stand up and swear on a Bible. Yeah, I know him. He's 73, I'm creating all those people right now. They have no independent existence at all because the past doesn't exist. I'm creating the past. The present creates the past. I'm creating it moment by
Mind-boggling.
moment because I believe this is here. So this is profound stuff. This means that if I want to change it, I have to change me, and then it will change. Spontaneous remission. If we get enough powers of people, we get the 100th monkey thing happening.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if we can align it precisely, and what happens in that alignment is we all decide we're going to open ourselves up for the universe to fill us in with the best possible picture to make the best possible use of what our consciousness and our world could be, then we've got the possibility of the reality that we're experiencing now that sucks could spontaneous remission just like that. It can all be different the next moment from now. This is the weird stuff. This is the true mind boggler of what quantum physics is saying about the nature of reality, that aligns exactly with the sutras of Patanjali, 4,000-year-old texts, and the Vedas. This is what they talk about exactly. I change me, I change reality. If we all align ourselves together at a collective, we change big reality, not just my own individual life and my experience. We have the possibility of changing everything. And where we're at right now, I think that's the only solution we've got left. We don't have time to legislate ourselves out of this mess. The boat is going over the cliff. The tipping point has already arrived. We've already screwed it up. We're going to have to deal with the consequences of catastrophic climate events that are just going to get worse. If we stopped it all today, all of that stuff would still happen. It just wouldn't be as bad, but it would be bad. My children, my son, this is my inheritance to him. This is my world.
Yeah.
When I became a father, it all got personal. I'm no longer, I've got gray hair. I mean, I've earned the right to, I don't have to be polite anymore. I can fire people out of my space. I don't have time for it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have time to sit around anymore. None of us do. We have to do something. It's a call to conscious spirit. And I have to say that that blessings to you and everybody in your organization for pulling off this, which
thank you.
really touches my heart, because you've got the right idea. You also are a fellow spirit brother who's got the call to action. You get it. It's just, we can't sit around anymore. This is what we're here for. This was not an accident that we're here. We chose this because we've got a peace. And I've spent my whole life, within each one of us, we've got our own light and dark battle. It's between entropy within a personal sphere is laziness. You're constantly fighting your laziness. Everybody's lazy. Everybody's got it. It's not just me. It's not just you. We've all got it. We all have to fight ourselves to get out of bed. We all have to fight ourselves to go to work. We have to fight ourselves to do the dishes and to take the trash out and to do our laundry and to sweep the floor. There's 1,000 levels of entropy that are constantly trying to make me lazy. Essentially, it wants me to not get out of bed and just die there, so it can disseminate me into my component parts, and the ultimate opposite of that is the biggest awakening of consciousness that you can imagine.
And intention.
Your biggest moment, the moment when you first took an acid trip and saw God, and all the pieces came together, and you knew that this is your birthright, and then you land back afterwards in your body, the same stupid idiot you were before with all these great memories, but you realize that it's my work. The work, I got the vision. Now I know what it's all about. I see how the pieces fit. Now
Well,
is the business of doing it.
thank you so much, Jeff. This has been a very rich session, and I am totally intrigued by the acuity and sophistication with which you're approaching the efficacy of sound. And I'd like to come down to San Diego for a treatment, boy. That would be just amazing.
Come on down. I'll play with your brain.
I'd love to have you play with my brain, man. God knows we all need it.
I guess the ultimate question for you is, would you trust your brain to this guy? I mean, I've got this ponytail and I got this weird room, and
I think I would, sir. I think I would. Well, thank you so much. We're a little over time today, but really appreciate your wisdom, Jeff. This has been a very deep session and exploration of neuroacoustics. So I recommend Dr. Thompson to everyone. And we're now going to bring this session to a close. Those of you who can stay, you're welcome to our after chat session. Stanley will put the link in the chat box. And then tomorrow, we're going to journey up to British Columbia, to a community there that has been experimenting with what it means to be an aware community. And as Jeff was just saying, that is the $64,000 question: how a large group can come together with a clear intention that can efficaciously bring about higher consciousness and change. And there's a community in British Columbia that's been experimenting with that. So we'll have that discussion with the founders and the spiritual leader of that community tomorrow. But Jeffrey, thank you so much for this today. Very exciting. And we'll be in touch soon. I'd like to have you back.
Anytime.
All right. Be well, everyone. We'll see you again tomorrow here on Humanity Rising. Bye for now. Thanks, Jeff.